As you are looking to start CRNA school, what are some of the differences in studying between nursing school and CRNA school?
We get this question all the time. I think that so many people found nursing school to be overwhelming or challenging, and then they hear that CRNA school is going to be even harder and they just can't picture it. And I want to not sugarcoat things for people. I want to be very honest and direct, but I also don't want people to be afraid. So we're going to get into what the differences in studying between nursing school and CRNA school look like in this episode.
And make sure you stay till the end of the episode, because that's where we're going to talk about the differences in board preparation between nursing school and CRNA school. So this episode, we're talking about tips about how to approach it, the differences, and then how to set yourself up for success when it comes to boards. I'm excited about this episode because I'm currently now a second year RRNA. Woohoo! And Chrissy is an educator. Both in Confident Care Academy and in real life, you teach RRNAs in the OR. So you see really kind of what it looks like for us to finish up didactic and what it looks like for us to step foot in the OR. So I think you're going to have a lot of really cool feedback about this too.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. So one thing I think people don't realize about nursing school is the reason why it feels hard, right? The content itself in nursing school is not what's challenging. It's the fact that you are pulled in so many directions at the same time. So lots of nursing programs, and I'm thinking about like 4-year BSN programs specifically, you either take your first 2 years of science courses and whatever other liberal arts prerequisites you need, and then you kind of like match into the second half of the 2-year nursing program. Sometimes you have to apply to that portion. Sometimes it's all integrated into one from the get-go, but you essentially have 2 years of nursing courses plus clinical, and it feels very chaotic and you're torn in many different directions. And that's something that you've never experienced or been prepared for in high school, right? So that is something that I think really overwhelms nursing students, especially when their exams are never really just content-based exams like they were the first 2 years of school and all of high school. And if you've ever done AP courses, we are used to memorizing something and then getting tested on that question. Once you start your nursing school classes, you're being tested NCLEX style questions, which are higher level integration and application questions, which you probably aren't really ready to answer in the beginning of your nursing curriculum, right? You've had very little clinical experience. The NCLEX is a safety exam, and it's asking a lot of application-based questions, and you just don't have the context for it yet. So a lot of nursing students have a hard time with this. CRNA school is not remotely similar to that at all.
So different. I think context, that really resonates with me about part of why nursing school is hard. It's hard for you to imagine what mobility aids a patient might need after XYZ orthopedic surgery as a first-year nursing student, because you've never seen that patient presentation. You've never seen the orthopedic device itself, and you don't work in the hospital for a lot of people. So you're being thrown all these terms, and then you're being asked application questions for stuff that you're brand new to, and you really have the learning curve is really steep because you're no longer being asked a multiple choice question in biology, which most people who are in nursing school thrive with STEM classes. Like, you're a very good test taker. And you get to nursing school and it's select all that apply options A through K about an application question about, like, again, mobility aids. That was something I struggled with when I was studying for nursing school. So I think that I agree. It's the volume of the work and it's the application side of things that are really challenging in nursing school. One thing just on that note, I will say that can help you. I really recommend seeking out a nursing assistant job while you're in nursing school, if at all possible. Chrissy was in an integrated program or a front-loaded, no, those are both CRNA school. Chrissy was in an accelerated nursing program. So that was so full-time. I don't know if it left room to work.
Yeah, nursing was my second degree. It was a 12-month accelerated second degree program. And I did have some nurses aid experience from before I went back to nursing school. At the time, they really discouraged us from working and taking externships. That being said, I do know some people who managed to do like 1 day a week externships. And if I could do it all over again, I would take advantage of that. But the problem with the accelerated programs is a lot of times you're squishing your clinical days into like 12-hour shifts, like 2 to 3 12-hour shifts a week. And so sometimes it's really not possible just because your schedule, they just don't give you free days to actually go into the hospital for an externship. But I know people who've managed to do it. So if you have the opportunity, I encourage you to. But again, it's very chaotic for a young person to navigate. By the time you get to CRNA school, it's a completely different ballgame. You have now already gone through nursing school. You've already worked as a professional nurse, and you've taken on really big challenges. When you get back to your CRNA courses, you're going back to those STEM-like questions. You're going into more multiple choice questions again. You're not writing essays or papers, or very rarely, I should say, maybe for like your doctorate classes, but not for the anesthesia classes. You're being tested on the material that you're studying, not in a trick question sort of way. You still could end up juggling a lot of different responsibilities. For example, your DNP project with clinical, with boards prep, with your courses, sometimes all at the same time, especially towards the end of school. In that way, CRNA school is 1,000 times harder than nursing school. The information is so much deeper and higher level, but you're not being tricked in the way that you are in nursing school. And it's not your first time experiencing that type of stress load. So you are far more prepared to take it on than you were at the age of 19.
This is something my friends and I talk about a lot. It's really interesting for us to go through the educational process in CRNA school and see that every time that there's a challenge set before us, we will rise to meet that challenge and we get to that level. And that really gets into this first kind of meaty talking point, which is that one of the big differences between nursing school and CRNA school is the expectation. So the expectation in nursing school is that you're going to graduate and pass your NCLEX and be a safe entry-level registered nurse who could work in any specialty. You're a generalist at that point, and the expectation is that you're going to pass the NCLEX. The expectation in CRNA school is that you are an experienced critical care nurse who is going to self-teach, largely self-teach at the graduate school level. This is a huge difference. And I see people who are on the younger side coming into CRNA school struggle with this. So the expectation is different. The goal, I'm going to say this very slowly and very clearly. The goal is not to make a 98% on all of your exams anymore. The goal is to make you a safe clinician who is going to pass your boards and show up into the OR prepared.
This is such a pet peeve for me. I can't even, this one just frustrates me so much. Do not go into your CRNA school program expecting to be spoon-fed the test answers. You are not getting a lecture with a PowerPoint that all the test questions are coming from. If that's the case, your class time is being wasted. What needs to happen is you have to read from the multitude of textbooks that are in your assigned reading. You need to be watching YouTube videos. You need to be using Apex. You need to be using all of the different resources at your disposal, and you need to be learning on your own. Your class time should be supplemental lectures to help give you context. You are going to have a lot of guest lecturers throughout your program who are going to talk about, for example, anesthesia for neurosurgery, and they might talk about how they do CRNAs in their operating room at their facility. That's not necessarily going to be the same thing that's on your exam, because this is supplemental education. You're an adult learner. This is in your control and in your hands. Don't show up expecting to be handheld, babied, and spoon-fed. If that's the case, CRNA school is probably not a great fit for you.
Could not agree more. And it's been interesting to go through the first year of grad school. I've finished year 1. I'm now into year 2 and starting to hear the perspectives of some classmates shift, or just people, peers on the internet. The expectations shift from, they didn't give me a study guide for this class, into into the expectation is that we do pre-reading and that we are on YouTube and that we are watching and that we are gaining deep understanding of topics. And the expectation is different. We are graduate school learners who are going to graduate with a doctorate degree. We're not going to get study guides for everything.
Did you get study guides in nursing school? I've never had someone give me a study guide for an exam in my life.
I think some of the professors that I worked with in nursing school, we got a few study guides.
I am offended by that as well. Like, what?
So this is something really quick personal experience wise. I'm actually kind of grateful for my non-traditional education. I was homeschooled K through 12 and I self-taught my entire life until I got to college, right? So sitting down in lecture, in a 4-hour lecture, is not particular. We myth busted learning styles yesterday. So go listen to that podcast about science-based study tips. That was such a great episode where we went through, what was it? How many studies did you go through?
I don't know. Too many.
At least 6 different studies that show best practice on how to actually study in a time-effective way. That being said, I feel like I grew up being a self-teacher for pretty much all topics, and I think that's particularly helped with CRNA school. Your learning does not begin and end in lecture. It starts well before lecture, and it continues far after lecture. So again, the expectation is different. In nursing school, you're expected to graduate and pass the NCLEX and be a generalist, and you get handheld a little bit through that process, but it's still overwhelming and challenging. Not to minimize the nursing school experience, it is your first time being exposed to all the information, and it can be extremely challenging. CRNA school, you're expected to show up as an adult learner, prepared and putting in time and effort on day one. And throughout the 3-year process, you're expected to graduate at a level where you were ready on day one after you pass your boards to walk into any OR in the country and provide safe anesthetic care. So the expectations are high, but you will find that once you are there, you are ready, which kind of gets into, okay, well, then what are the actual techniques? Like, what are the actual tips that you use in CRNA school? What did you use, Chrissy?
When I started CRNA school, my first semester, I definitely studied wrong. I repeated a lot of my study techniques from nursing school and from my first undergraduate degree and things that have worked for me in the past. It's kind of hard for people who, if you're the type of person who used to get good grades easily, like in high school, I never really studied much. I kind of just showed up in class. I would listen to the lecture. I'd glance at some notes like once before the test, and I had straight A's in everything. I've always just been really good at school. I got to undergrad. I had to put more effort in because I was a biology minor and a Spanish minor, and like I took on a lot of classes at once and I worked 2 jobs, but same thing. I was able to kind of read information, listen to the lecture, and cram before an exam and do okay. Nursing school for me, a lot of cramming as well. When I got to CRNA school, I was like, woof, I've never done real hardcore studying in my life. So that was kind of a smack in the face. I learned that I did need to pre-read before class. That was a mistake I made my first semester. I would encourage you guys, if you're in your early anesthesia courses, to start out with an easy read textbook for your pre-reading. So your first round, your primer round, I love Morgan and McHale. It is written with the intent of a medical student who's like never been in an OR understanding anesthesia. That's like how the authors wrote the book. And it's a really great like primer, basic for before you hear lecture. So it's really easy to understand without context of the operating room. So read the Morgan and McHale chapter before you hit the classroom. Go to class, stay engaged in class. I used to print out the PowerPoint and just like write notes on the side of the PowerPoint. If you have an iPad with like a stylus and the Notability app, there was a time when I also was using that as well to record the lecture and like write on screen. I know a lot of people who would listen back to lecture. I tried that. It didn't quite work for me. And I think it turned out to be kind of a waste of time. And if you guys go back to the science-based study tips video, I would equate that a lot with like rereading. It's something people do, and it's kind of a waste of time.
The only thing I'll add with that is that you'll find which professors include elements that will be on the exam that are not in any of the source materials or on the lecture themselves, and they will only say it verbally once. And if you don't record that, or if you don't make note of something that was an aside that ends up on an exam, you can get a little bit of spicy water. But that I think I only have like one of my 5 professors who does that. So I know when he's lecturing that I'll record it and I'll make note of anything that he mentions that's like a specific. But I agree. Aside from that, it's not particularly like an evidence-based study technique. And then you'll learn your faculty and kind of how they write exams as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You will eventually need to dig into like your Nagelhout textbook or your Barish textbook, because a lot of exam questions will come from that. You're going to have, some board style questions as well. Again, they're not trick questions like they are for nursing school. So even though they're board style questions, they are straightforward, but they're very in-depth and high level. So when I went to Nagelhout and Barish, I would study sections of those books. I wouldn't necessarily read the whole chapter cover to cover. I would read any sections that I had questions on or needed to clarify. You will find in most CRNA programs, if not all, a lot of your questions will be directly from those books as well. Apex at the time was only a boards prep material. It was not like a learn as you go comprehensive program. It was like the early days of Apex, but Apex has really evolved and it's now designed to be part of your CRNA school curriculum. So if your school does not have Apex, I definitely encourage you to purchase it on your own. I think it's worth every penny. And I would do an Apex review as well. I started doing that later on in school once we started getting into the more boards level prep questions too. I would do like a little bit of Apex every day. Going back to like our science-based study tips, we'll get into like more techniques that are good for test taking in general. So please check out that video. I think you guys are really going to like it. But that was like kind of my first round of studying for school. And then I would meet up with my friends and talk through the lectures and like we'd clarify points for anything we didn't understand. And then I'd be ready for test day.
I use very similar, almost identically similar techniques. I think in relation to some of the mistakes that I've learned from at the end of first semester of didactic. One thing in relation to this whole science-based study tips video that we did a little while ago, go check out that episode if you haven't already seen it, is in CRNA school, the level of understanding that you have to have on a topic for the exams is so much deeper than for nursing school. And when I was first starting didactic, the first semester of didactic, and I was making materials for my spaced repetition study technique, I was making too many flashcards because I didn't understand the information at a deep enough level to summarize it effectively. And so I would end up with hundreds of note cards about a few or about a handful of topics that then the volume was so large and also the summarization was so poor of what I was doing that I ended up kind of wasting time with like large amounts of flashcards or decks to get through that it ended up wasting time. So the result of that is that you have to understand a topic before you make a flashcard or before you make a Picmonic or an Anki deck or however you're using your spaced repetition tools. You have to understand the topic before you make the flashcard. An example that Ali Abdal gave that I found to be true for myself was talking about the brachial plexus and memorizing innervations and which muscles are related to which branches of what area of the brachial plexus. You can make 40 different flashcards about which nerve is from C5 to C6, the trunks, the roots, the divisions, the branches, and then innervations. But until you understand the flow and the general path of the brachial plexus, it doesn't make any sense to make 200 flashcards about it. You have to actually sit and spend time with a topic before you make all of your decks to go through. So that's one thing that I will say, and that ties into comprehensive learning. So you need to do pre-reading first. That's kind of your first pass at a topic. Chrissy recommends Morgan and McHale. I like Morgan and McHale as well. Nagelhout as well, especially section reading. Like once you get into the anesthesia pharmacology, particularly, like I'm not going to read the entire chapter about like pain medications and sedative hypnotics. I'm going to read just their section on ketamine. And then I'm going to go back to my other notes. And then I'm going to refresh on ketamine. I'm going to go to the lecture and I'm going to watch what the lecture says about ketamine. And then I'm going to go to YouTube and I'm going to watch a YouTube video about ketamine. And then I will make my flashcards based off of the summarization of all of those topics. So that is really kind of like the biggest takeaway from semester one was understand before you memorize. Because if you don't understand and you just start memorizing things, when it comes to the OR, you're not really going to understand why you're doing what you're doing, right? Like, and it's all application. And CRNA school is cumulative. So our exams are cumulative because I need to still know what I knew on day one about inhalation anesthetics when I walk in to clinical next year. I need to know my MAC values. I need to know all of my doses. I need to know the mechanism of action. You can't just learn and forget like you can in some other programs, right? So this is not like Bio 101 where you can just like learn something and then forget it. You need to know on day one what you're walking into, which really then leads into what are the most effective and science-based ways that you can study. And that leads into our partner for this episode, Picmonic.
The number one science-based study technique, and again, we talked about this in our last video, it's practice questions and spaced repetition learning. So we love Picmonic because it uses these science-based learning tools to not only improve recall, but also your understanding as a whole. Picmonic has tens of thousands of practice questions to make sure that you're studying effectively, and it automatically integrates spaced repetition learning.
The adaptable nature of their question bank for their spaced repetition learning, combined with the visual tools, provides students the opportunity to not only memorize concepts, but to really understand topics as a whole, which matters so much in anesthesia.
I love that Picmonic also has explanation videos, so you can really focus on understanding as opposed to just memorization, which again is so important for preparing you to be a good clinician. Picmonic serves over 1.6 million healthcare students and not only focuses on passing exams, but also concept retention and understanding as a whole, which is going to help you now to pass your exams as well as in the future as a clinician.
We've both personally checked out Picmonic, and their resources for nursing students studying for the NCLEX is incredible. But I've also checked out their graduate level educational resources that's targeted for medical students and nurse practitioner students. And as RRNAs, I think that the pharmacology library and the customizable videos and spaced repetition Picmonics offer a lot of resources for us as well.
Make sure to check out the link in our description and use the code Confident Care Academy for 20% off.
So now that we've talked about spaced repetition learning, we've talked about some study techniques, let's talk about time management and the time commitment to expect in CRNA school, because I think this is another differentiating factor between nursing school and CRNA school. And I'd love to hear about your experience in CRNA school that was 24 months. How was that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the program I went to was the only CRNA program that was 24 months long. It's 36 now that they've added on the DNP. Most CRNA programs at the time were 27 to 36 months long for the Masters of Science in Nurse Anesthesia. Cramming it into 24 months was quite a whirlwind for me. I had already told you guys that I did a 12-month accelerated BSN program, and that was really busy. This was absolutely bananas by comparison. Our first semester was only didactic, so meaning, 5 courses in the classroom, just traditional classroom learning, test taking. And then our second semester, we had a week off between our first semester and second semester. And in that week, we went into the operating room all 5 days for clinical. And then we started semester 2. And from then on, we were in the OR 4 days a week with 1 day of classes all day long. And a second day a week, we would actually leave clinical at 3 p.m. and have to drive back to campus and take 2 night classes.
Wow, that's the pace of that alone is something that it's actually hard for me to even think about. Mm-hmm. The DNP programs are, it's spaced out more.
It's so much more spaced out. Now, we didn't have that night class portion the entire time. I think we only did that for 2 more semesters. Afterwards, we continued with 4 days a week of clinical and then 1 day of class. And every time we had a break between semesters, we went into clinical all 5 days. I only had 1 week off my entire CRNA school program in August. Yeah, and we did not take off during the holidays. If you were at a clinical rotation site that used you for call, which mine did, you could go in for Christmas, you could go in for New Year's. Like, we did not take time off.
That would be a good question to ask during your interviews, how the RRNAs are utilized within the facilities that you're rotating through, right? So it's actually great as a student to be used as staff and take call, You're going to learn more. You're going to see a lot more, especially, you know, if your night airway call at a big facility, you'll be doing a lot of emergency response. Like that is a great learning opportunity. But it's also something to keep in mind that with the academic calendar that you are following for didactic, where you get like 2 weeks off at Christmas, all these holidays, and like off for the 4th of July and stuff. Once you're in clinical, you're not following the academic calendar. You're following whatever your facility coordinator or scheduler puts you in the room as. So that's just kind of an expectations management thing for people who are looking at CRNA school. You're not going to get 3 weeks off for Christmas, most of the program. Definitely not while you're in clinical. What can you say in relation to, you were in an integrated program, right? So for people who are like looking into CRNA school, you have either front-loaded programs where you do all of your didactic stuff first, or you have integrated programs where you're doing didactic and OR at the same time. How much would you say you were studying like a week? What can people expect?
Oh, a lot. So, I mean, we were in the OR 50 hours a week because you got there so early. I was in the OR by 5:30 every morning. That's another expectation to manage, guys. Get ready for early wake ups.
You're about to be a morning person. Against your will or not, you will be a morning person while you're in CRNA school.
Oh, yeah. And earlier on in clinical, we were let out pretty early, usually by 3 p.m. But as the semesters went on and our cases got bigger and more challenging, you were expected to finish your case. So there was a semester that I rotated through Fox Chase Cancer Center, and sometimes my cases would end at 9 or 10 p.m. and I'd have to be back the next day. On top of that, you're studying for exams. And on top of that, you have to read up on your cases and know about your patient coming into the OR the next day. So the study burden was heavy. I would say I studied probably 20 hours a week for class. Let me think about this. If I had 4 clinical days a week, I probably studied 3 hours a night for each like clinical day. That was like an average. In the beginning, when you're new to clinical, you're going to be studying more hours because you're re-memorizing your basics of anesthesia and everything's new to you. It probably took me at least like 4 hours per night to study for clinical. As time went on, it would take me closer to like 2 hours a night. So, okay, let's say, let's just split the difference. Let's say 3 hours a night times 4 days a week. So what's 3 times 4 is 12 hours a week of clinical preparation. And then for my courses, I mean, probably another 20 hours a week on top of that. I had really hard study boundaries. I had rules like no studying on Friday nights. I did not study after 9 p.m. unless, of course, it was for clinical. And like if I got out of the OR super late and I just had to study late for clinical, but otherwise no studying past 9 p.m. ever. And I didn't study after 5 p.m. on Saturdays or Sundays. So I made sure that my weekend evenings, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, were to myself. And that really helped with work-life balance and helped make it manageable for me.
I think there's a lot of circulating anxiety and angst for the people who are looking at CRNA school, who are pre-CRNA school, about the time commitment of anesthesia school and how much you're studying. I think it's hard to differentiate and delineate a little bit because it is all cumulative of studying for your cases, which is, of course, the most important because it's a patient's life on the line, versus studying for your didactic because they're complementary, right? So like your basics of anesthesia class is also going to, it has some overlap with case prep. So I think now it'll be interesting to see how people who are in like front-loaded programs, how much their study burden is during the didactic phase versus the clinical preparation phase. And I don't know if it can really be teased out because you were learning it all at the same time,
Yeah, you really can't separate the two for what I was studying necessarily, but these programs are so much more spread out now, right? So that exact same program, the students are now in clinical 3 days a week instead of 4. When they have breaks, they actually get breaks. They don't go into clinical 5 days a week anymore. They have a couple short breaks throughout the program. They also have some sick time. We didn't really have sick time. We were allowed to miss 3 days maximum of clinical the entire program.
Wow.
And if you had a parent die, you got 2 bereavement days. That happened to 2 of my classmates. 2 bereavement days. Wild. I mean, I just can't even imagine. But, now these programs are a lot more spread out, right? So now they're taking like 3 to 4 classes at a time for a semester instead of 4 to 5, or they're doing like 3 classes plus their DMP project. And again, only 3 days of clinical. So the burden is much lower for students. It's a lot more spread out. I think that sometimes with all their free time, they end up not being forced to be as efficient as I was forced to be though. And it's almost like easy for them to get caught in the weeds and like spin their wheels and study too much and study ineffectively. So sometimes I think it actually drives them a little more insane. And again, go back to that science-based study tips video and set those hard boundaries for yourself so that you keep it manageable, because these 3-year programs, they are a marathon. What I did was a sprint. You got to really set the pace and protect yourself. How many hours a week do you think that your classmates on average are studying in didactic right now? You're in a 3-year program and it's front loaded instead of integrated. What are you seeing as like the class high, low, and in between?
Such an interesting question. So I study no more than 20 hours a week. I'm in a didactic program. I've also invested a fair amount of time in researching science-based study tips. I also have the privilege of being friends with a few CRNAs who are great sources of knowledge. But that aside, I really believe in working smarter, not harder with your time. And because I know that spaced repetition, teach back, pre-reading, I know all of these methods work for me. I study probably on the lower end for people in my cohort. I know a lot of people, especially those who are they were younger getting into CRNA school, and those who were a bit older and coming back to class. I know they study like 50 hours plus a week.
50?
They are like sun up to sundown studying, watching YouTube videos. And it's also, you can't really gauge somebody's quality based off of the quality of their study time based off what they say or what they post online. So, but I'll see the people in the library from like 8 a.m. or like before class at 8 a.m. and they're still there at like 9 plus p.m. at night, which for me, at the end of the day, I will like very openly say that I don't get 100s on these exams. I'm very much happy with like an 88 to a 92, somewhere in there. Of note, for those who are listening who are pre-CRNA school, you have to maintain an 82 average in the program. Every CRNA program that I know of, you have to maintain an 82% average to stay enrolled in the class. For me, I've found that utilizing science-based study tips has allowed me to free up some time to actually spend extracurricular time shadowing. Our faculty allows us to shadow pre-clinical, and I found that to be so, so helpful. I've now shadowed, I think, 11 days between plastics and pediatric dentistry, and I'm about to start shadowing in an inpatient setting. And to me, learning and seeing the application earlier on clinically, these do not count for my case hours. It's just kind of early exposure. I think that's been like super beneficial. And then I'm now heading into semester 2 of 3 really difficult, meaty, heavy didactic courses, no more than 20 hours a week. I will also say that over the last year, writing all these Confident Care Academy lectures it's helped. It's been a primer for the level of anesthesia schools.
Yeah, shameless plug. The Confident Care Academy membership. We were not planning on talking about this, but the Confident Care membership, we write lectures so in depth, way deeper than what nursing school covers or what your orientation covers or really what any resource on the internet covers. When I go to compile like the skeleton of these pathophysiology and pharmacology lectures, the textbooks aren't deep enough. So I actually go and use a conglomerate of today's latest evidence-based research studies and the lab studies of like how this receptor site was discovered and, you know, what they did to the mice to decide how the ketamine worked, these types of things. And that's what I compile the lectures based off of. It is almost at the same depth as CRNA school. We come just a hair shy of it because I'm not trying to prep you guys for boards. I'm trying to prep you guys to be really good nurses. These lectures, though, it's so funny. Like Anna, she goes to school and then she's like, oh, we just got tested on this. And it's amazing. They're like perfect primers at like that basic level for kind of, and it's ended up shortening her study time because she's already lectured on this herself.
I'm like reading Nagelhout and looking at all the current research and writing the propofol lectures, and then everything that I write, Chrissy will comb through and approve and like supplement with the latest research. So it's been such an accelerator in my own study time because when we study propofol in CRNA school, I'm like, oh, I just wrote a lecture about that like 2 weeks ago. And it's a refresher, and that's a spaced repetition in and of itself. So if you're somebody who is currently in the Confident Care Academy membership who is pre-anesthesia, I do want to encourage you that you are investing in yourself, not only now, but also for your future training. So it's only going to make that process more streamlined. Then you're going to use this knowledge now as a registered nurse, as a preceptor who is educating registered nurses. And if you're on the anesthesia track, you're just going to understand more and more as time goes on. And it is going to be something that's helpful. I feel like time management tools, because Compton Care Academy, writing the lectures, talking to you day in and day out, it definitely helps. But on the flip side, I think there's also some like structure and time management things that help a lot. For me, one of my jobs is being online. So we do social media, right? If I open up my phone to use a calculator to calculate something about lung ventilation, volume, something or another, the temptation for me to open Instagram is high. I lock my phone in a box.
She locks her phone. She has no self-control over this. It's hilarious.
I have a little bit of self. Okay.
She does not.
I don't have a ton of self-control. So I literally remove the human factor myself from the equation. And we leave no options for Anna's self-control or lack thereof. And I lock my phone in a box. So you've probably heard of the Pomodoro method. It's like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, repeat times 4. And then you take like a 30-minute break after those 2 hours. You would be shocked by how many students spend 9 hours in a library and get less done than a student who does 4 Pomodoro sessions. If you are somebody who can actually set a timer, not on your phone, set a timer on your computer, and actually commit to those 25-minute blocks, you're going to be shocked at how much you get done. You will be absolutely blown away. I stand by this method 10 toes down. I think that if you can do 4 Pomodoro session blocks on any topic, it should be enough for you to write a paper and get an in-depth understanding of any class topic. I think that you should not be spending 9 hours in a library. I think you need to do 4 to 6 different Pomodoro session blocks.
And the reason for this is the human brain only has so much of an attention span. Like, it doesn't matter how good of an attention span you think you have. The science is the science. You just can't truly absorb that much information when you're looking at a paper for 9 hours straight in the library. So breaking it up into these little bite-sized chunks allows you to devote your full attention for short bursts of time and kind of just clean the slate. Those hard study boundaries, like getting sleep, also actually scientifically helps improve retention. So these are like really important things to have, these study boundaries, including the lockbox. I love that. There's also apps that like can
deactivate your certain apps.
Yeah, you can like block yourself from going on social media with different apps as well. One thing that I found to be really helpful also was being proactive with blocking out my tasks and study sessions ahead. So one thing that is important to master is kind of like that. It's the Eisenhower matrix, right? When we talk about tyranny of the urgent, it's understanding the difference between what's important and what's urgent. And then putting number 1 at the top of your list, the things that are important and urgent. And those are the things you tackle first. So this exam is coming up. It is important. And it's also coming up in 3 days. It's urgent. At the same time, I have a clinical day tomorrow, and that is coming up even sooner. And it's even more important than my exam, because if I get an exam grade that is poor, I can study harder and do better next time. If I am unprepared for my clinical case, I can be kicked out of the operating room. I can have a phone call to my program director, or most importantly, I can hurt a human or kill a human. So we're going to put that as number 1, right, kids?
Right.
Right.
Correct. Yes, Chrissy.
Yes, Chrissy. But, put those blocks ahead. Like every single day on your calendar, have 3 tasks. Your must-do task, and that is the thing that's fallen number 1 in your matrix, your most important and urgent thing. Your should-do task, maybe it's the important thing or the urgent thing. That's your number 2 task. And then your would like to do thing. That's your number 3 task. Like, it's got to get done, but, things like laundry, calling your mom, would like to do, right? So if you every single day have your 3 tasks planned out on your calendar ahead for the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to find that you're going to be a lot more efficient in blocking out things ahead. And if a day gets too crazy, if you're too tired, if you fall behind on something, you have room to move it over, because you've already for the last week been reviewing your flashcards for pharmacology and reading up on your basics of anesthesia for clinical and doing all of these things ahead of time when you've had spare time in those blocks.
I have so much to say on this. And honestly, I think I need to film a YouTube video on my personal channel about how I just do time management stuff in CRNA school while also running a business, right? Like we full time also run Confident Care Academy. What I will say is this, in my opinion, you need a digital planner. I don't think a physical planner is great because you can lose it. And then at any time you lose your brain. And if you put all of your friends' birthdays, all of your events in some physical planner and you lose it at any given time, then you are out of luck. And then also you can't carry a massive physical, really adorable paper planner into the operating room with you, but you will usually be able to use the bathroom and have your phone. I'm a huge proponent of Google Calendar. I schedule everything in my life. Chrissy will be in New York City looking at her phone and she gets a notification when I have an exam. Like,
it's cute. We're integrated.
It's all integrated. We share 3 Google Calendars. Huge Google Calendar fan. And then when it circles back to exactly what you were talking about urgent and soon and less urgent and less soon and hitting your 3 big tasks of the day, I encourage both nightly and weekly check-ins with your goals. So Sundays, it's so cute. Oh my gosh. I love being single and having a cute little apartment. It's adorable. So on Sundays, I do life maintenance stuff. Sundays, I look at my Google Calendar and I will see when my next exam is, what lectures I need to write for CCA, what content I need to make, what groceries I need to go get. And I spend about an hour allocating everything so that I will be able to plan it throughout the rest of the week and also looking forward and ahead 2 weeks in the future. And then from there, I also integrate with Trello. I can make a video about that if you guys want for just like my personal day-to-day items and to-do lists. So then you never end up floundering and overwhelmed. Because in my opinion, stress and feeling overwhelmed and feeling flustered is when you have too much on your plate and you don't have a plan about how to make it better. Would you agree that like stress and being overwhelmed and flustered comes from like not having a plan and like doing too much?
It's back to that phrase that we said in our last film batch. If you fail to plan, you can plan to fail. And I think that's a huge source of stress for students, is that kind of like not having hard boundaries, not having hard limits, not giving themselves breaks, not giving themselves sleep. People get divorces in CRNA school.
I did.
They develop drinking problems in CRNA school.
I did not do that.
She did not do that. People go through really major stressful events in CRNA school because they're not giving themselves these boundaries to protect themselves. And I think that is also true for nursing students as well. But it's, again, an expectations management thing. Guys, if this video was helpful for you, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out, as well as download if you are on a podcast platform. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode drop. We'll see you there.